And again, welcome to this evening of the spoken word, featuring the works of Robert Frost. This is a personal favorite of mine. My name is Robert Goodman. I'm a resident of Long Branch, and I've been producing spoken word events for the last almost 6-7 years in various locations, several here with my co-producer, Tara Sullivan, the chief librarian here at the Elberon branch of the Long Branch Free Public Library. I'm very glad to be here tonight, especially with the group ensemble that we have of performance readers who have shown such a great devotion to studying the works that we've picked for this evening's performance. And it's certainly our hope that you'll enjoy it as much as we've enjoyed learning about Robert Frost and his work. Before we get underway, and I have a few introductory remarks about Robert Frost, I just want to note that there's a couple of mistakes in your program. They were omissions. Our crack production staff was working on this last night, probably a little bleary-eyed, and they omitted two pieces, one from the first act, right after the piece called Stars. It's called Ghost House. It's not in your program. And then in the second act, it's right after To Look at Two, and it's Acquainted with the Night. And thankfully, our editorial staff synced us up right before the performance to let people know. Anyway, whoever produced the program, we're going to fire them and get someone more qualified next time to get this work done. But anyway, all humor aside, so a little bit about Robert Frost. He kind of has the reverse story of most Americans. Most Americans landed on the East Coast and headed west. Robert Frost himself was born in San Francisco in 1874. And his father was a journalist, William Nicol Frost, and his mother was Isabel Moody. And when he was about 4, they picked up the family and moved to Lawrence, Massachusetts. When he was 9, he lost his father. His father had a number of health issues, most of them having to do with alcohol consumption. And 11 years later, when he was 20, he lost his mother to cancer. So when we think about some of the themes that he explored in his work, the abstractness of loneliness, you can certainly understand that, he saw grief early on and had to grapple with it. There was also cases of mental illness in the family, depression specifically, that he had to grapple with, a sister who had to get institutionalized. But despite all those type of challenges, he had quite a bit of accomplishment behind him early on. He's one of the few poets who actually, for lack of a better term, made a living as a poet. He started out as doing some kind of what he referred to as tedium of manufacture work, which he couldn't stand. And then his grandfather was able to allot him some land for a farm that was nearby. And he worked that for 9 years, but it wasn't getting him where he wanted to be because he knew he wanted to be a poet. He had gotten some connections with some publishers overseas, specifically London, and he picked up the whole family and went there in 1913 and actually had his first anthology of poems published called A Boy's Will. And then shortly after that, it sold so well that he published another one called North of Boston. And many of the pieces that you will hear tonight are from that work, North of Boston. You'll certainly hear a lot of the popular pieces tonight that many of you know so well, Stopping by Wood on Snowy Evening and The Road Not Taken, but you'll also probably hear some things that you have never heard before. And a couple of the poems that we selected are, they might be considered longer form poems, and we decided to experiment a little bit and do them as dramatic presentations. So hope you enjoy those and get a little bit of experimentation in spoken word, but we think you'll like the result. In terms of, I'm going to wrap this up quickly because I want to get us underway. We have a lot of reading to do. Very much, Robert Frost was a product of his New England life. He saw much of life through his experience in that lens of living in New England. And New England was absolutely most beautiful, especially at this time of year, in autumn. And with that, I'll start us off with his piece, October. O hushed October, morning mild, the leaves have ripened to the fall. Tomorrow's wind, if it be wild, should waste them all. The crows above the forest call, tomorrow they may form and go. O hushed October, morning mild, begin the hours of this day slow. Make the day seem to us less brief, hearts not averse to being beguiled. Beguile us in a way you know. Release one leaf at break of day, and at noon release another leaf, one from our trees and one far away. Retard the sun with a gentle mist, enchant the land with amethyst. Slow, slow, for the grape's sake, if they were all, whose leaves already are burnt with frost, whose clustered fruit must else be lost, for the grape's sake, along the all.
I'll be reading Two Tramps in Mud Time. And as I read this poem, keep in mind it was written in the midst of the Great Depression, so two lumberjacks meandering by really is not a stretch. They covet the speaker's wood splitting task. And the speaker, knowing that these guys need the work, he knows that it would be the generous thing to do to give them the work, and yet he decides that he's still going to do it himself and goes on to explain why. I connected to the speaker in a way because my father loved to split wood. In fact, it kept him strong well into his 70s. And not unlike the speaker, he would totally get into the zone as he worked. So to kind of demonstrate that this job is not just one of need, but almost a spiritual connection as well. Two Tramps in Mud Time. Out of the mud, two strangers came and caught me splitting wood in the yard. And one of them put me off my aim by hailing cheerily, "Hit them hard." I knew pretty well why he had dropped behind and let the other go on away. I knew pretty well what he had in mind. He wanted to take my job for pay. Good blocks of oak it was I split, as large around as a chopping block. And every piece I squarely hit fell splinterless as a cloven rock. The blows that a life of self-control spares to strike for the common good, that day giving a loose my soul, I spent on the unimportant wood. The sun was warm, but the wind was chill. You know how it is on an April day. When the sun is out and the wind is still, you're 1 month on in the middle of May. But if you so much as dare to speak, a cloud comes over the sunlit arch. A wind comes off a frozen peak, and you're 2 months back in the middle of March. A bluebird comes tenderly up to a light and turns to the wind to unruffle a plume. His song so pitched as not to excite a single flower as yet to bloom. It is snowing a flake, and he half knew winter was only playing possum. Except in color he isn't blue, but he wouldn't advise a thing to blossom. The water for which we may have to look in summertime with a witching wand, in every wheel rut's now a brook, in every print of a hoof a pond. Be glad of water, but don't forget the lurking frost in the earth beneath. That will seal forth after the sun is set and show on the water its crystal teeth. The time when most I loved my task, the two must make me love it more by coming with what they came to ask. You'd think I never had felt before the weight of an axe head poised aloft, the grip of earth on outspread feet, the life of muscles rocking soft and smooth and moist in vernal heat. Out of the wood, two hulking tramps, from sleeping God knows where last night, but not long since in the lumber camps. They thought all chopping was theirs of right. Men of the woods and lumberjacks, they judged me by their appropriate tool. Except as a fellow handled an axe, they had no way of knowing a fool. Nothing on either side was said. They knew they had but to stay their stay, and all their logic would fill my head, as that I had no right to play with what was another man's work for gain. My right might be love, but theirs was need, and where the two exist in twain, theirs was the better right, agreed. But yield who will to their separation, my object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation, as my two eyes make one in sight. Only where love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes, is the deed ever really done for heaven and the future's sakes.
The poem I'm going to read is called Bereft. In 1894, Robert Frost wanted to marry his high school sweetheart, Eleanor White. He wanted this so desperately that he quit his studies at Dartmouth and urged Eleanor to quit St. Lawrence University. When she refused, it sent him into a depression so deep that he actually planned to commit suicide in the woods near the Great Dismal Swamp. It was during this period of depression that he wrote Bereft. Fortunately for Eleanor, who did marry Frost in 1895, and for English-speaking poetry lovers, he did not go through with his suicide plan. He died of a pulmonary embolism at the ripe old age of 88. Bereft. Where had I heard this wind before change like this to a deeper roar? What would it take my standing there for, holding open a restive door, looking downhill to a frothy shore? Summer was past and the day was past. Somber clouds in the west massed. Out on the porch's sagging floor, leaves got up in a coil and hissed. Blindly struck at my knee and missed. Something sinister in the tone told me my secret must be known. Word I was in the house alone somehow must have gotten abroad. Word I was in my life alone. Word I had no one left but God.
The Gift Outright is a poem about national identity and patriotism. It's about making sacrifices for one's land and nation. It's a poem that was read at the presidential inauguration for John F. Kennedy in 1961. And the piece that was actually written for that occasion, Frost had difficulty reading. I think the glare was too bright or some sort of reason. And so he read the gift outright from memory. As it turns out, it was a perfect piece for the occasion. The gift outright. The land was ours before we were the land's. She was our land more than 100 years before we were her people. She was ours in Massachusetts, in Virginia, but we were England's, still colonials, possessing what we still were unpossessed by, possessed by what we now no more possessed. Something we were withholding made us weak, until we found out that it was ourselves we were withholding from our land of living, and forthwith found salvation in surrender. Such as we were, we gave ourselves outright. The deed of gift was many deeds of war, to the land vaguely realizing westward, but still unstoried, artless, unenhanced, such as she was, such as she would become.
So carpe diem, right, is Latin for seize the day. So Frost took this opportunity to kind of challenge, not just the original Shakespeare carpe diem, but also the personification of time and age, almost in challenging its perception of the day, right, which would be our present. So carpe diem. Age saw two quiet children go loving by at twilight. He knew not whether homeward or outward from the village, or chimes were ringing, churchward. He waited, they were strangers, till they were out of hearing, to bid them both be happy. Be happy, 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 and seize the day, or of pleasure. The age-long theme is ages. 'Twas age imposed on poems their gather roses burden, to warn against the danger that overtaken lovers from being overflooded with happiness should have it, and yet not know they have it, but bid life seize the present. It lives less in the present than in the future always, and less in both together than in the past. The present is too much for the senses, too crowding, too confusing, too present to imagine.
I flew in on the red eye early yesterday morning from Bora Bora. So in Tahitian, I would say La Orana, which means hello. Robert Frost's approach to poetry is the austere and tragic view of life that emerges in so many of Frost's poems is modulated by his metaphysical use of detail. As Frost portrays man, man might be alone in an ultimately indifferent universe, but he may nevertheless look to the natural world for metaphors of his own condition. Thus, in his search for meaning in the modern world, Frost focuses on those moments when the seen and the unseen, the tangible and the spiritual, interact. I'm going to read the poem Stars. So the essence of the poem would be this: the stars are blind to what we do, or if we suffer or not. But that does not mean they cannot be a source of our wisdom. They can still be our guides, the savers in our perils. It is just that if we smile or cry, they are indifferent to it. They're just guiding forces there to show the path, right or wrong, beyond their domain or interest. I also left my glasses home. Stars. How countlessly they congregate o'er our tumultuous snow, which flows in shapes as tall as trees when wintry winds do blow. As if with keenness for our fate, our faltering few steps on to white rest, and a place of rest, invisible at dawn. And yet, with neither love nor hate, those stars, like some snow-white Minerva's snow-white marble eyes, without the gift of sight.
All right, so Ghost House is perfect for not just fall, but October, and even more so for, days before Halloween. So, Ghost House. I dwell in a lonely house I know, that vanished many a summer ago, and left no trace but the cellar walls, and a cellar in which the daylight falls, and the purple-stemmed wild raspberries grow. O'er ruined fences the grapevines shield, the woods come back to the mowing field. The orchard tree has grown one copse of new wood and old where the woodpecker chops. The footpath down to the well is healed. I dwell with a strangely aching heart in that vanished abode there far apart, on that disused and forgotten road that has no dust bath now for the toad. Night comes, the black bats tumble and dart. The whippoorwill is coming to shout and hush and cluck and flutter about. I hear him begin far enough away, full many a time to say his say, before he arrives to say it out. It is under the small, dim summer star. I know not who these mute folk are who share the unlit place with me. Those stones out under the low-limbed tree doubtless bear names that mosses mar. They are tireless folk, but slow and sad, though too close keeping are lass and lad, with none among them that ever sings, and yet in view of how many things as sweet companions as might be had.
I was also in Hawaii, so I have to say aloha. I'm going to, one of the things that Frost does, and in the book that he wrote on education by poetry, he said, poetry begins in trivial metaphors, pretty metaphors, grace metaphors, and goes on to the profoundest thinking that we have. Poetry provides the one permissible way of saying one thing and meaning another. Unless you are at home in the metaphor, unless you have had your proper poetical education in the metaphor, you're not safe anywhere. I'm going to read the poem, Never Again Would Bird Songs Be the Same. And the central idea of the poem is that the poet's trying to tell us that when the human blends with the natural, something magical is created. And the effect of it never fades away. At a deeper level, Frost is telling us that life may end, but all that made us thankful for life does not. The beauty of nature never fades, and our loved ones still exist in our memories. Therefore, even though the brevity of life and the death of our loved ones may make us question the utility of life itself, as we heard when he got depressed when he couldn't even get married right away. So that, therefore, even though the brevity of life and the death of our loved ones may make us question the utility of life itself, we should never stop valuing and cherishing our memories. And this poem essentially is talking about the loss of his wife when she passed away. Never again would Bird's song be the same. He would declare, and could himself believe, that the birds there in all the garden round, from having heard the day-long voice of Eve, had added to their own an oversound. Her tone of meaning, but without the words, admittedly an eloquence so soft, could only have had an influence on birds when call or laughter carried it aloft. Be that as it may, she was in their song. Moreover, her voice upon their voices crossed had now persisted in the woods so long that probably it would never be lost. Never again would the bird's song be the same. And to do that to birds was why she came.
So I'm going to read The Runaway, which, to put it simply, is about fear. And I wasn't that familiar with the piece before I was given it to read, and I love the way we can see things through Frost's eyes in a way that is so plain yet so magical. So this is The Runaway. Once, when the snow of the year was beginning to fall, we stopped by a mountain pasture to say, "Who's colt?" A little Morgan had one forefoot on the wall, The other curled at his breast. He dipped his head and snorted at us, and then he had to bolt. We heard the miniature thunder where he fled, and we saw him, or thought we saw him, dim and gray, like a shadow against the curtain of falling flakes. I think the little fellow's afraid of the snow. He isn't winter broken. It isn't play with the little fellow at all. He's running away. I doubt if even his mother could tell him, "Sakes, it's only weather." He'd think she didn't know. Where is his mother? He can't be out alone. And now he comes again with a clatter of stone, and mounts the wall again with whited eyes, and all his tail that isn't hair up straight. He shudders his coat as if to throw off flies. Whoever it is that leaves him out so late, when other creatures have gone to stall and bin, ought to be told to come and take him in.
Hi, everybody. It's not all a bummer. He had some witty comments that he made with friends and stuff. I wanted to share. We did this the other night here when we did a rehearsal, and I was looking around my best friend, the laptop, and about something else besides the poem, because I haven't looked at Robert's poems since I was an undergrad 50 years ago. And I said, ugh. But I fell in love with this one particular one, and I argued with my wife, and I argued with a couple other people that I did this thing. It's about an evening in a sugar orchard where the narrator just on a lark, on a dreary day, and in a sugar orchard, maple trees, you know the deal. Okay. From where I lingered in a lull in March outside the sugar house one night for choice, I called the fireman with a careful voice and bade him leave the pan and stoke the arch. "Oh, fireman, give the fire another stoke and send the sparks up the chimney with smoke." I thought a few might tangle as they did among the bare maple boughs, and in the rare hill atmosphere not cease to glow, and so be added to the moon up there. The moon, although slight, was moon enough to show every tree with a bucket with a lid, and on the black ground lay bearskin bring rug of snow. The sparks made no attempt to be the moon. They were content to figure in the trees as Leo, Orion, and the Pleiades. And that was what the boughs were full of soon. Okay, I'm gonna give you a couple of these quotes. You can find these online. I have some if anybody wants to pick a copy. Let me just pick some at random that I thought you might find amusing. I hold it to be the inalienable right of anybody to go to hell in his own way. Most of the change we think we see in life is due to truths being in and out of favor. The world is full of willing people, some willing to work, the rest willing to let them. The reason why worry kills more people than work is that more people worry than work. The worst disease which can afflict executives is their work, is not as popularly supposed alcoholism, it's egotism. Poetry is about the grief. Politics is about the grievance. Take care to sell your horse before he dies. The art of life is passing losses on. And to be social is to be forgiven. I got some more for you in the second half, okay?
All right. As previously discussed, we're going to be doing a bit of a dramatic presentation on this next piece. It's called Home Burial. As you can imagine from the title, it's not a topic that's cheerful in any way. It's actually about a very serious topic about the loss of a child and how a couple are dealing with it. For purposes you'll discover later, I'm going to give the characters names. The woman's name will be Amy. The man's name will be Joe. And this will be presented by Sal Rosio as Joe and Irene Ramstein as Amy.
He saw her from the bottom of the stairs before she saw him. She was starting down, looking back over her shoulder at some fear. She took a doubtful step and then undid it to raise herself and look again. He spoke, advancing toward her. "What is it you see from up there, always? For I want to know." She turned and sank upon her skirts at that, and her face changed from terrified to dull. He said to gain time, "What is it you see?" Mounting until she cowered under him. "I will find out now. You must tell me, dear." She, in her place, refused him any help, with the least stiffening of her neck and silence. She let him look, sure that he wouldn't see. Blind creature. And a while he didn't see. But at last he murmured, "Oh," and again, "Oh."
What is it? What? She said.
"Just that I see."
You don't, she challenged. Tell me what it is.
The wonder is, I didn't see at once. I never noticed it from here before. I must be wonted to it, that's the reason. The little graveyard where my people are. So small, the window frames the whole of it. Not so much larger than a bedroom, is it? There are 3 stones of slate and 1 of marble, broad-shouldered little slabs that are there in the sunlight on the side hill. We haven't to mind those, but I understand. It is not the stones, but the child's mound.
Don't, she cried.
She withdrew, shrinking from beneath his arm that rested on the banister, and slid downstairs, and turned on him with such a daunting look, he said twice over before he knew himself, "Can't a man speak of his own child he's lost?"
Not you. Oh, where's my hat? Oh, I don't need it. I must get out of here. I must get air. I don't know rightly whether any man can.
"Amy, don't go to someone else this time. Listen to me. I won't come down the stairs." He sat and fixed his chin between his fists. "There's something I should like to ask you, dear."
You don't know how to ask it.
"Help me then." Her fingers moved the latch for all reply. "My words are nearly always an offense. I don't know how to speak of anything so as to please you, but I might be taught, I should suppose. I can't say I see how. A man must partly give up being a man with womenfolk. We could have some arrangement by which I'd bind myself to keep hands off anything special you're a mind to name. Though I don't like such things twixt those that love. 2 that don't love can't live together without them, but 2 that do can't live together with them." She moved the latch a little. Don't go. Don't carry it to someone else this time. Tell me about it if it's something human. Let me into your grief. I'm not so much unlike other folks as your standing there apart would make me out. Give me my chance. I do think, though, you overdo it a little. What was it brought you up to think the thing to take your mother loss of a first child so inconsolably in the face of love? You'd think his memory might be satisfied.
There you go, sneering now.
I'm not. You make me angry. I'll come down to you. God, what a woman, and it's come to this. A man can't speak of his own child that's dead.
You can't, because you don't know how to speak. If you had any feelings, you that dug with your own hand, how could you? His little grave, I saw you from that very window there, making the gravel leap and leap in air, leap up like that, and land so lightly and roll back down the mound beside the hole. I thought, who is that man? I didn't know you. And I crept down the stairs and up the stairs to look again, and still your spade kept lifting. Then you came in. I heard your rumbling voice out in the kitchen, and I don't know why, but I went near to see with my own eyes. You could sit there with the stains on your shoes of the fresh earth from your own baby's grave and talk about your everyday concerns. You had stood the spade up against the wall outside there in the entry, for I saw it.
I shall laugh the worst laugh I ever laughed. I'm cursed. God, if I don't believe, I'm cursed.
I can repeat the very words you were saying. 3 foggy mornings and 1 rainy day will rot the best birch fence a man can build. Think of it. Talk like that at such a time. What had how long it takes a birch to rot, to do what was in the darkened parlor? You couldn't care. The nearest friends can go with anyone to death comes so far short. They might as well not try to go at all. No. From the time when one is sick to death, one is alone, and he dies more alone. Friends make pretense of following to the grave, but before one is in it, their minds are turned and making the best of their way back to life and living people and things they understand. But the world's evil. I won't have grief, so if I can change it, oh, I won't.
There. You have said it all, and you feel better. You won't go now. You're crying. Close the door. The heart's gone out of it. Why keep it up? Amy, there's someone coming down the road.
You think the talk is all. I must go somewhere out of this house. How can I make you?
If you do, she was opening the door wider. Where do you mean to go? First tell me that. I'll follow and bring you back by force. I will.
I feel like we need to give that a minute.
Yeah.
In stopping by woods on a snowy evening, our speaker is a traveler who stops to watch the snowfall. The woods are intriguing and beautiful, and she'd like to stay, but there are obligations all around, and she still has a long ways to go. So to me, this poem evokes a sense of mindfulness, of being in the moment, being present. However, some see it as an allegory of death, which I guess why poetry is so amazing, because different people read it and see different things in it. I see a moment of peacefulness in the midst of responsibilities and societal pull. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep.
That concludes the first act of our performance reading tonight. We're going to just take a short break. Certainly feel free to partake of the refreshments, speak with some of the performance readers informally if you wish. Whatever you want to do, grab a book, sit down, read. It is a library. And
Robert Frost is good.
And just check with the cashier on the way out to validate your parking. So anyway, we'll see you in about 10 minutes.
So it was before everything was off, that how they did it. And I was trying to think of a way to signal when I was on my house, but it won't be on. Yeah. We'll have to tell them for their piece, they got
Oh my gosh. They're like
Hi, how are you?
Since you're saying that performance readers, you're reading this kind of,
Volunteers. She just volunteered.
First time I've ever seen it. It's like,
Well, you saw me someone angry. Come, thank you. You saw me angry one time for someone coming into our workshop from work again. Yeah, I was trying to turn the back.
Right, like the map, I don't see that on the map.
But we thought it's not.
In case you can't find it, right, you can't just cross the track anywhere. I'm glad you made it. Very nice. It's like a park, Long Branch, it's just basically a neighborhood. Exactly. Believe it or not.
To be honest, I literally drive in.
It was named by a man. It's not like an Indian, you know, Native American name, a settler
I haven't. Hi, how are you?
Okay, how you doing?
Okay.
Glad you made it. Yeah, I come to night things.
Yeah, no, it's basically.
I think they're going to
So I
Have you
tried
read any of the, like the last three
funding, material.
Yeah, I think I went to the thing.
I was trying to go to the last one, the weather was very bad, especially on the
Cabinet, power, fiber, copper. Dedicated to build. Like normally when you're doing data centers,
Yeah.
these are brand new centers. Like landlords. I got one in Orangeburg, New York.
I don't know, rain, yeah, yeah, and you know, especially if they have a project.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crap dealing with the finance. One guy's in London, the other guy's in Florida. I'm trying to explain to them. They're the finance guys.
Isn't that your job?
As compared to the block at $33. And we just this night. Late, yeah.
I said
That's great. Good. I'm very happy.
Yeah, and I was trying to change the road. Like I said, Robert, he came up as a and then for some reason my phone went when I was hitting the mic, and I'm trying to recite a text. Double. Well, but not the whole thing, just certain phrases and words. It's like I'm stuttering, yeah. I'm like, oh. So, and I'm driving, so I'm trying to look at it. So finally I fixed a couple of things and I sent it to him. And literally as I hit send, he called me. So you know Robert from Galatians, right? But so we went to see the stores at night. Yeah. So that was the first time I did it.
But you got to say the
what, 3 or 4 programs a year, maybe?
Yeah.
It was that bad weather on that night. And then,
It's been a rough year altogether.
That's on the state for a couple of weeks, and many of them, let's shake on it. Hi, yeah.
I'm reading.
He's still in here.
The one time I went to jail, I was at least.
Oh, I mean, you and I, right, after November, well, yeah, maybe you and I will get together, we'll do it around Max or something like that. So that you're always doing this. Always.
Welcome back, Robert Frost, part 2. Thank you for joining us for the first act. Hope you can stay for the second. No one will be blocking the door, but we have a lot to look forward to. Really great performances. You know, one of the I'll say it now just because it saves me the trouble of saying it later. But one of the great joys I have in producing these events is seeing where people start with these readings and how they tend, most likely, end up mastering it. They really give it their voice and bring it to life. And that's what I find so vital about spoken word events, is it takes these things that we read off the page and animates them in a way that no reading can do. And that's why it's become very special in my own life to be able to be part of this and to work with people who see it the same way and bring so much vitality to what we read. I often say that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and Robert Frost is certainly one of those. And this just gives an opportunity to give homage to that and our own creative vitality. So thank you for attending tonight. It's really a joy to do this, and hope to do some more. We'll get started. Irene Jamtem will be doing my November guest.
My November guest is about depression and sorrow personified as a woman the poet loves. And that's all I was going to say. And then as I've been mulling over, it made me think about that bridge almost for grieving, when there's that desire to part with the pain, but also the desire to not be so quick because it means distance from perhaps the object that was lost or gone. My November guest. My sorrow, when she's here with me, thinks these dark days of autumn rain are beautiful as days can be. She loves the bare, the withered tree. She walks the sodden pasture lane. Her pleasure will not let me stay. She talks and I am fain to list. She's glad the birds are gone away. She's glad her simple worsted gray is silver now with clinging mist. The desolate, deserted trees, the faded earth, the heavy sky, the beauties she so truly sees. She thinks I have no eyes for these, and vexes me for reason why. Not yesterday I learned to know the love of bare November days, before the coming of the snow, but it were vain to tell her so, and they are better for her praise.
So this next piece is a piece on somewhat on reflectance and grief, really, right? It's called Reluctance. Out through the fields and the woods and over the walls I have wended. I have climbed the hills of view and looked at the world and descended. I have come by the highway home, and lo, it is ended. The leaves are all dead on the ground, save those that the oak is keeping to ravel them one by one and let them go scraping and creeping out over the crusted snow where others are sleeping. And the dead leaves lie huddled and still, no longer blown hither and thither. The last lone aster is gone. The flowers of the witch hazel wither. The heart is still aching to seek, but the feet question, whither? Ah, when to the heart of man was it ever less than a treason to go with the drift of things, to yield with the grace to reason, and bow and accept the end of a love or a season.
Mending Wall. This poem is the story of two neighbors coming together in the spring to complete a yearly task, which is the mending of the wall between their properties. Our speaker is playful and treats the mending of the wall as a kind of game almost. The neighbor is more stoic and repeats the same mantra in reply to our speaker as he questions the wisdom of mending this wall. I love the irony in this piece of the wall that is bringing the two together each year, only so that they can reinforce the division that it creates between them. Mending wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair where they have left not one stone on stone. But they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but it's spring mending time, we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. To each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves and some are nearly balls. We have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side. It comes to little more. There where it is, we do not need the wall. He is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only and the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says again, good fences make good neighbors.
The Silken Tent is a love poem about a woman's soul and her attachments. Seems that it is about a specific woman in Frost's life, Kay Morrison, with whom he had a relationship after his wife died. It is about moving freely, but yet being held by some ties. She remained remarried despite his preference. It is also about how impactful a single bound can be. Also made me think about larger, more existential ideas about the pull and tug and freedom and attachments in interpersonal relationships. We can all relate to that. As well as desire as people and the reach for freedom and the ways we choose limits or are required to conform. The silken tent. She is as in a field a silken tent at midday when the sunny summer breeze has dried the dew and all its ropes relent. So that in guise it gently sways at ease, and its supporting central cedar pole that is its pinnacle to heavenward and signifies the sureness of the soul seems to owe naught to any single cord, but strictly held by none is loosely bound by countless silken ties of love and thought to everything on earth the compass round. And only by one's going slightly taut in the capriciousness of summer air is of the slightest bondage made aware.
In preparing for this, I did some research online about Robert Frost and his family. It's a work in progress because I noticed that some of the ages that my sources cited differed somewhat from those that Robert found. So I will have to do some more research. Although some people think of Robert Frost as a genial, down-to-earth nature lover, there is a dark side to poems like Bereft. It is clear that Frost was well acquainted with grief. His father died when Frost was 11, or 9. His mother died of cancer when he was 20 or in his mid-20s. Frost was outlived by only 2 of his children, Irma and Leslie. 2 of his children died young. His older son, Elliot, died of cholera at the age of 4, and his youngest daughter, Eleanor, died within a few days of her birth. His younger son, Carol, committed suicide, and his daughter, Marjorie, died in childbirth. His beloved wife, Eleanor, died a few months after their 42nd anniversary. Mental illness, variously described by researchers as depression or schizophrenia, ran in the Frost family. Frost, his mother, Isabella, and his wife, Eleanor, all suffered from depression. Frost committed his sister, Jeannie, to a mental hospital where she died 9 years later. His daughter, Irma, was also committed to a mental hospital. The dark side of Robert Frost's poetry, which was so apparent in Bereft, does not appear in Two Looked at Two, the next poem I will read. Two looked at two. Love and forgetting might have carried them a little further up the mountainside, with night so near, but not much further up. They must have halted soon, in any case, with thoughts of a path back, how rough it was, with rock and washout and unsafe in darkness, when they were halted by a tumbled wall with barbed wire binding. They stood facing this, spending what outward impulse they still had in one last look the way they must not go, on up the failing path where if a stone or earth slide moved at night, it moved itself. No footstep moved it. This is all, they sighed, good night to woods. But not so, there was more. A doe from round a spruce stood looking at them across the wall, as near the wall as they. She saw them in their field, they her in hers. The difficulty of seeing what stood still like some upended boulder split in two was in her clouded eyes. They saw no fear there. She seemed to think that too, thus they were safe. Then, as if they were something that, though strange, She could not trouble her mind with too long. She sighed and passed unscared along the wall. This then is all. What more is there to ask? But no, not yet. A snort to bid them wait. A buck from round the spruce stood looking at them, across the wall as near the wall as they. This was an antlered buck of lusty nostril, not the same doe come back into her place. He viewed them quizzically with jerks of head, as if to ask, why don't you make some motion or give some sign of life? Because you can't. I doubt if you're as living as you look. Thus till he had them almost feeling dared to stretch a proffering hand, and a spell breaking. Then he too passed unscared along the wall. Two had seen two, whichever side you spoke from. This must be all. It was all. Still they stood, a great wave from it going over them, as if the earth in one unlooked-for favor had made them certain earth returned their love.
I have two poems that will be done with, but I want to give you some more quotes and, from our esteemed Robert. A poem begins in delight and ends in wisdom. Love is an irresistible desire to be irresistibly desired. This one talks about love and depression and sorrow and sadness. This is just the longer quote. My sorrow, when she's here with me, thinks these dark days of autumn rain are beautiful as days can be. She loves the bare, the withered tree. She walks the sodden pasture lane. The funny thing when a man hasn't anything on earth to worry about, he goes off and gets married. A mother takes 20 years to make a man of her boy, and another woman makes a fool of him in 20 minutes. The only certain freedom is in departure. A diplomat is a man who always remembers a woman's birthday, but never remembers her age. Happiness makes up in height what it lacks in length. A bank is a place where they lend you an umbrella in fair weather and they ask for it back when it starts to rain. Okay, that's cool. Two poems I have, short ones, and I got to like them a lot because if you're like me, I don't know, being an English major and so forth, and you're struck with a poem, you'll wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning and go, what the hell, that's what I've been trying to say all these years. Oh my goodness. All right, let me get these two for you. Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Nature's first green is gold. Her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaves a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down today, nothing gold can stay. And finally, the shortest poem that I think we've done is I'm using to read if I can find it. Thank you. Oh, bless you. Out of the way a crow shook down on me, the dust of the snow from a hemlock tree has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. Thank you very much.
This is not in the program. Acquainted with the Night. Another poem about depression, but a stark loneliness as well. And as we've heard from our other readers tonight, Frost understood well the darkness that lurked on the periphery of life. We heard about the father who struggled with alcoholism. His mom was depressed, mental illness in the family. Poetry seemed to be the glue that may have held Frost together, a way of distilling a vast and terrifying wild into controlled verse. And I thought this was profound. It was a way to engage in life, not to escape it. Acquainted with the night. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet, when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye. And further still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one, acquainted with the night.
All right, so I think we can all admit this next piece speaks for itself. Fire and ice. Some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice.
A little stagecraft here. It's heavy. All right, I think I kind of got us. We're going to be a little squishy here, I think. Let me, I'm just going to put it on top, right? Ignore what we're doing. It's all good.
Ignore the person behind the curtain.
Someone sitting with a blanket.
Yeah, you'll be on the other side. Well, so you're sitting here beguiled by what we're doing here, and we're doing a little preparation. Like I said, we were doing a bit of an experiment tonight with a couple of the longer form pieces that were originally published in Frost edition of North of Boston. You heard the earlier piece, Home Burial, quite a dramatic piece, even as a reading off the printed page. And we hoped the performance tonight kind of brought it to life, as troubling the topic as it is. The piece that we're about to read is called In the Home Stretch. And I remember when you and I were first reading this at Writing Group, and reading through it and just kind of imagining that this was Joe and Amy, maybe a couple decades later, a little older, after suffering yet another setback, but a little older, a little wiser, a little more forgiving, and a little bit more learned about life. in the home stretch. She stood against the kitchen sink and looked over the sink out through a dusty window at weeds the water from the sink made tall. She wore her cape, her hat was in her hand, and behind her was confusion in the room of chairs turned upside down and something, come to look, every room in a house has a parlor, a bedroom, and a dining room thrown pell-mell into the kitchen. And now and then a smudged and turtle face looked in the door behind her and addressed her back. She always answered without telling or even turning. Where will I put this walnut bureau, lady?
Put it on top of something that's on top of something else, she laughed. Oh, put it where you can tonight and go. It's almost dark. You must be getting started back to town.
Another blackened face thrust in and looked, and smiled, and when she did not turn, spoke gently. What are you seeing out that window, lady?
Never was I belated so before. Would evidence of having been called lady more than so many times make me a lady in common law, I wonder?
But I ask, what are you seeing out the window, lady?
What I'll be seeing more of in years to come, as here I stand and go the round of many plates with towels many times.
And what is that? You only put me off.
Rank weeds that love the water from the dishpan more than some women like the dishpan, Joe. A little stretch of mowing field for you. Not much of that until I come to woods that end all. And it's scarce enough to call of you.
And yet you think you like it, dear.
That's what you're so concerned to know. You hope I like it. Bang goes something big away off there upstairs. The very tread of men as great as those is shattering to the frame of such a little house. Once left alone, you and I, dear, will go with softer steps up and down stairs and through the rooms, and none but sudden winds that snatch them from our hands will ever slam the doors.
I think you see more than you like to own out that window.
No, for besides the things I tell you of, I only see the years. They come and go in alternation with the weeds, the field, the wood.
What kind of years?
Why, latter years, different from early years.
I see them too. You didn't count them.
No, the further off so ran together that I didn't try to. It can scarce be that they would be in number we'd care to know. For we are not young now. And bang goes something else away off there. It sounds as if it were the men went down, and every crash meant one less to return to lighted city streets we too have known. But now we're giving up for country darkness.
Come from the window, where you see too much for me. Take a livelier view of things from here. They're going. Watch this husky swarming up over the wheel into the sky-high seat. He's lighting his pipe now, and squinting down his nose at the flame burning downward as he sucks the pipe.
See how it makes his nose side bright. A proof how dark it's getting. Can you tell what time it is by that? Or by the moon? The new moon. What shoulder did I see her over? Neither. A wire she is of silver, as new as we to everything. Her light won't last us long. It's something, though, to know we're going to have her night after night and stronger every night to see us through our first 2 weeks. Oh, but Joe, the stove, before they go, knock on the window. Ask them to help you get it on its feet. We stand here dreaming. Hurry, call them back.
They're not gone yet.
We've got to have the stove, whatever else we want for. And a light. Oh, have we a piece of candle if the lamp and oil are buried out of reach?
Again, the house was full of tramping, and the dark, door-filling men burst in and seized the stove. countermouth-like hole was in the wall, to which they set it true by eye, and then came up the jointed stovepipe in the middle. So much light and airy for their strength, it almost seemed to kind of come ballooning up, slipping from clumsy clutches toward the ceiling. "A fit," said one, and banged the stovepipe shoulder. "It's good luck when you move in to begin with, a good luck with your stovepipe. Never mind, it's not so bad in the country. Settle down when people are getting on in life. You'll like it." Joe said, "You big boys ought to find a farm and make good farmers and leave other fellows the city work to do. There's not enough for everybody as it is in there."
God, one said wildly, and when no one spoke, say that to Jimmy here. He needs a farm.
But Jimmy only made his jaw recede, fool-like, and rolled his eyes as if to say he saw himself a farmer. Then there was the French boy who said, but serious, that made them laugh. My friend, you ain't know what it is you ask." He doffed his cap and he held it with both hands across his chest as if it were a bow. "We're giving you our chances on the farm." And then they all turned with deafening boots and put each other bodily out of the house. Goodbye to them. We puzzle them. They think I don't know what they think we see and what they leave us to. That pasture slope that seems to back some farm presents us, and your woods to northward from your window at the sink, waiting to steal a step on us whenever we drop our eyes or turn to other things. As in the game, 10-step that the children play.
Good boys they seemed, and let them love the city. All they could say was, God, when you proposed their coming out and making useful farmers. Did they make something lonesome go through you? It would take more than them to sicken you, us, of our bargain. But they left us so as to our fate, like fools past reasoning with. They almost shook me.
It's all so much. What we've always wanted, I confess. It seeming bad for a moment makes it seem even worse still, and so on, down, down, down.
It's nothing. It's their leaving us at dusk. I never bore it well when people went. The first night, after guests have gone, the house seems haunted or exposed. I always take a personal interest in the locking up at bedtime, but the strangeness soon wears off.
He fetched a lantern, a dingy lantern, from behind a door. There's that we didn't lose, and these and some matches he unpocketed. For food. The meals we've had no one can take from us. I wish that everything on earth were just as certain as the meals we've had. I wish the meals we haven't had were anyway. Whatever you know where to lay your hands on.
Oh, the bread we bought in passing at the store. There's butter somewhere, too.
Well, let's rend the bread. I'll light the fire for the company for you, and you'll not have any other company till Ed begins to get out on a Sunday. Well, he'll look us over and give us his idea of what needs pruning and shingling and breaking up. He'll know what he would do if he were we. And all at once, he'll plan for us and plan to help us, but he'll take it out in the planning. Well, you can set the table with the loaf. Let's see where you find your loaf. I'll light the fire. I like the chairs occupying other chairs. Hard to do with a lantern in your hand. Oh, not offering a lady.
There again, Joe. You're tired.
I'm drunk, nonsensical, tired out. Don't mind a word I say. It's a day's work to empty one house of all household goods and fill it another 15 miles away, and all that you do no more than is just dump them down.
Dumped down in paradise we are, and happy.
It's all so much what I've always wanted. I can't believe it's what you wanted too.
Shouldn't you like to know?
I'd like to know, if it is what you wanted, then how much you wanted it for me.
A troubled conscience. You don't want me to tell if I don't know.
I don't want to find out what can't be known. But who said first the word to come?
My dear, it's who first thought the thought. You're searching, Joe, for things that don't exist. I mean beginnings. Ends and beginnings. There are no such things. There are only middles.
What is this?
This life? Our sitting here by lantern light together amid the wreckage of a former home? You won't deny the lantern isn't new. The stove is not. And you are not to me, nor I to you.
Perhaps you never were.
It would take me forever to recite all that's not new and where we find ourselves. New is a word for fools in towns who think style upon style in dress and thought at last must get somewhere. I've heard you say as much. No, this is no beginning.
Then an end?
End is a gloomy word.
Is it too late to drag you out for just a good night call on the old peach trees on the knoll to grope, by starlight in the grass for that last peach the neighbors may not have taken as their right, when the house wasn't lived in? I've been looking. I doubt if they've left us any meat grapes. Before we set ourselves right to the house, first thing in the morning, out we go to go a round of apple, cherry, peach, pine, alder, pasture, mowing, well, and brook. All of a farm it is.
I know this much. I'm going to put you in your bed. If first I have to make you build it. Come. The light.
When there was no more lantern in the kitchen, the fire got out through crannies in the stove and danced in yellow wrigglers on the ceiling, as much at home as if they'd always danced there. Thank you for your patience and all that staging. I hope it was worth the effort. Want the all right, hold on. We're not professionals, but I think
What?
we got it.
Somebody call the Teamsters.
This is a union shop? So Robert Frost once said, "One thing I care about and wish young people could care about is taking poetry as the first form of understanding. If poetry isn't understanding all, the whole world, then it isn't worth anything." So I'm going to read The Road Not Taken. And when I taught developmental psychology for about 25 years, in the midterm exam, I stuck that poem in there and asked the students to tell me, what does that have to do with development? And they struggled. It was a great question. Robert Frost wrote The Road Not Taken as a joke for a friend, the poet Edward Thomas. When they went walking together, Thomas was chronically indecisive about which road they ought to take, and in retrospect often lamented that they should, in fact, have taken the other one. Soon after writing the poem in 1915, Frost griped to Thomas that he had read the poem to an audience of college students. and that it had been taken pretty seriously, despite my doing the best I could to make it obvious by my manner that I was fooling. Mea culpa. However, Frost liked to quip. I'm never more serious than when joking. As his joke unfolds, Frost creates a multiplicity of meanings, never quite allowing one to supplant the other, even as the road not taken describes how choice is inevitable. The road not taken begins with a dilemma, as many fairy tales do. Out walking, the speaker comes to a fork in the road and has to decide which path to follow. The road not taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference?
That brings us to the conclusion of the program tonight. I'm so deeply grateful that you were all here to hear these performances. I know that the speakers appreciate you being here and enjoying this as well. I appreciate the help from Alma with the stagecraft and our little dramatic stunt that we were able to pull off, and I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to say a few closing remarks, just simply about Frost's work. You know, as much as it may have dwelt on loneliness, you know, the great lesson of literature is that we're not alone. You know, if you heard some of what you heard tonight and saw some of yourself in it, then you've learned that lesson, that we are not alone at all. Matter of fact, we often share many of the same experiences. The sadness, the joys, of course, and just what all of life encompasses. That being said, I would like to say a few words about the performance readers tonight. And if I call your name, if you'd please rise, I would appreciate it. I'm going to start with probably one of my oldest friends, Sandra Bain. And when I say oldest friends, not because we're old, because we're not old. But our friendship probably goes, you know, can be described as one of decades.
Decades.
Yeah. We went to high school together and became reacquainted through our love of spoken word performances, and always deeply appreciative of what you bring to these performances. It's just outstanding, and it's wonderful. So thank you. And then we'll do a bow in a moment, and we're expecting applause. So I'd also like to ask Irene Ramjitan to rise as well. Irene is someone who I became acquainted with through the Thompson Park Monmouth County Poetry Program, and I've met so many wonderful people, and many of you are here tonight, and she's one of them. And she is so willingly, even when I've thrown the really challenging stuff over the wall at her, she's picked it up and mastered it, and just very, very pleased with what she brings to these performances as well. Right behind me is Mr. Marshall Hart, world traveler. Marshall, I've probably known you in the briefest time, but in that time, you and I have been able to share so much in both of our love of poetry. And Marshall is a poet in his own right. And actually, one of the kind of fun things I did was I was going to one of the Monmouth County readings, and I told Marshall about it. He goes, "Oh, I can't make it that tonight, but I wanted to bring something." And so I said, "Well, give me your pieces. I'll read them for you." And I was able to do so. They were well received, by the way. So anyway, directly behind me is Sal Rossio. I have such a great deal of respect for Sal. Sal is a wonderful poet. The intricacy of his craft work with words is amazing. And the storytelling that goes along with it is amazing as well. And I'm so glad that he takes the stuff I shovel over the wall to him, and he takes it on with gusto. Hearing him recite Shakespeare's Henry IV speech was a real delight during the summer. Behind him is Janet Burkhead. Janet is a longtime employee of the Long Branch Public Library System, and
31 years and counting.
And counting. Sounds like he's counting towards a retirement date, but maybe not yet.
We hope not yet.
Right. And always, we both share a great love of English literature, and have been able to, kind of have several discussions around that as well. And always enjoy what she brings in terms of vitality behind what she's reading, as well as her thoroughness in research. And I now have to go double check my research. So I would trust hers before I would trust mine. So anyway, and then
I was rushing, so don't.
That's all right. And then finally, Jean Samakowitz here. Jean, I've known quite a while. Actually, I think we started together when we did the Walt Whitman work back over in Navesink. So deeply grateful for your work. Jean is also a retired professor of English, and he and his wife Alma have been involved in community theater work for probably the better part of 30, 40 years?
35 years.
Yeah. So they probably looked at our amateur efforts at Stagecraft tonight and said, well, we can do better than that. But again, thank you all for being here this evening and being part of this. This was such a great special collection of not only poetic pieces, but also the ensemble that brought it here tonight. And again, I want to thank you so much.
Wait a second, Robert.
Yes, somebody.
Oh, I forgot. You're so quiet over there.
In the script.
Yeah, if I'd written one. Tara Sullivan, who really I cannot do these works here without. My co-producer and conspiratorial partner, and the one who allowed me to actually invent the term amoral cultural Philistine, which if you read your programs in her bio, you'll catch up on that. But I'll explain that later. Anyway.
Please do.
Yeah. Anyway, I have nothing but high praise for someone who is not only just a great partner to work with for these performance readings, but is also just an absolute wonderful friend, and deeply grateful that yours and my path crossed so many years ago, and we get to do this.
And we're grateful that the two of you do this so that we can join you.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. So with that, if we'd all join hands, and we'll take a bow, a final one for the night. But thank you.
And a very, very big thank you to Robert, our director, our producer, our killer of me when technology goes awry. But really, his love of this is why we're all here, and we've been brought together, and we've made great friendships with people over the years, and love seeing each other when these productions happen and having people return. So thank you so much for being supporters of this and other programs that we look forward to doing.
And if you have friends who love poetry, tell them about the next one.
Yes, next time bring a friend.
And in the boxes, just so everyone knows, there are coffee cakes. You're all welcome to take one home, eat it in the car, not make it home, whatever you want. But they are quite lovely.
We got the special coffee cakes that are past expiration, and they are really wrinkly sounding. We were hoping you would open them during the performance. Anyway, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you.